You've noticed how sometimes the strongest aren't those who scream loudest, but those who remain standing when everything falls apart. For it is while many people see strength as a synonym for tolerance or control, the story of Joshua shows us the opposite. Courage is to obey, even with fear, and strength is to trust, even without seeing a way out. This is not motivational talk. It's a teaching that can transform your journey. Today there are people living in the automatic, just reacting to the pressures of life, accumulating empty victory, and carrying burdens I shouldn't even be holding. And worst of all this, with a display of spirituality, that it is nothing more than appearance, only that Joshua did not agree to live, so he was chosen in the midst of chaos, took on a call that seemed too big for him, and even with all doubts, became the man who conquered what Moises couldn't find. And most surprising, he didn't do it with magic formulas, expensive courses, or amazing strategies. He did with something that almost nobody teaches. Today, focus, strength, faith, and simple prayer, yes, but powerful. Too much to ignore now. The question remains, what if that same courage that moved Joshua was available? It's not easy for you either to take the place of a giant. Joshua knew this. Moises, despite his extraordinary secretariat, failing at a decisive point, and it stopped him from entering the promised land. Now the responsibility fell on Joshua, who wasn't just a warrior, but someone that carried the weight of the continuity of a divine purpose. Imagining the mission of such a revered leader, and still have to deal with tough people with their fearful complaints and memories of the past. And that's where the most important detail came in. Joshua's call did not come on merit. But by the way, God doesn't choose the smartest. It empowers the willing. Joshua found himself facing a frightening scenario, with fortified enemies, strategic decisions to make, and a crowd to lead. But what sustained this man was not his own strength. It was faith and constant prayer by direction. Instead of trying to control everything, he learned to depend, and this is a teaching worth gold. Today, don't try to take care of everything alone or ask for help. Delegate trust. Many people hang because you're afraid to start without feeling ready. But look, for Joshua, he didn't feel either. And yet God called him. The secret is not in being prepared, but in being willing to be molded. In the process, this is valid for those who want to change their careers, take on a new ministry, or rebuild life after a failure. The courage that God expected from Joshua was not absence of fear. It was the decision to continue even inside. And then a new phase began. Seemed magnificent. God told Joshua to march around the city for 7 days. On the last day, there was a serious scream, a cry to tear down walls and human logic. It doesn't make any sense, but true faith doesn't go hand in hand with logic. She walks with obedience. Jericho was an almost impenetrable fortress, yet the people marched in silence, day after day, until the 7th day, to the sound of. And with a shred of faith, the walls fell. Was proof that when God gives direction, no matter the size of the obstacle. A lot of people are trying to push Jericho's unarmed strength, try to open doors in the scream, but not in the cry of faith and the cry of despair. The difference is there. Jericho did not fall because the people were strong, but because he obeyed to the end. And the lesson is simple but powerful. There are victories that only happen after 7 days of perseverance. That is, maybe you need to insist a little more, read that book you started, and stop that prayer coming back that you abandoned, restart that project that was left in the drawer. To the wall did not fall on the first spin, but she falls. The most beautiful thing is to realize that even in silence, the people kept marching. And how many times life demands exactly that from us, to go on, even without seeing results, even without hearing demonstrations, even without understanding. Joshua understood that faith is not about understanding everything, more about following even when it looks like nothing will change, and so on. In step, God was setting the stage for a historic turn, but the path is not always free of traps. At a time in which deaths were a matter of life and death, Joshua was deceived. A people called Gibeonite pretended to come from distant lands, ripped clothes, used moldy bread, and made up a compelling story. Joshua and the leaders of Israel believed and made friends with them. Detail without consulting God. The lesson came fast sometimes. The mistake is not in trusting people, but in not putting God at the center of the decision. And between us, who has never made a mistake by acting on impulse? The most impressive comes. Then Joshua discovers the lie, but don't break the deal. He honors the Dada word. knowing it was deceived. This is integrity rare nowadays. Joshua could have taken revenge, but preferred correction for honor. He even protected the Gibeonites when they were attacked by other kings. Look, that powerful example does not. It's because someone gets you wrong that you need to return. In the same coin at times. The true sign of strength is to be fair even when you have reason. To be tough. This episode teaches us two things we usually forget first. Before any serious decision, stop and pray. Or can be before closing a deal. Accept an invitation even before starting a relationship. Second, when making mistakes, honor the consequences with maturity. That goes for debts, promises, commitments. Joshua did not blame others, he took over, and in the midst of it all, God would still use that mistake as a stage for one of the miracles, most unexpected in history. In that battle, time was the enemy. The armies were winning, but the night was approaching, and with it the chance of victory slips through the fingers. Joshua, in an act of pure faith and courage, made a bold prayer, asked the sun and moon to stop, and God answered the day. Stretched the light remained, and the people overcame it. It wasn't just a cosmic miracle. It was a reminder that whoever walks with God can pray for big things without fear of looking crazy. Many people do not see the extraordinary because you stopped making bold prayers. Joshua could have said, "I've done my part," but he prayed again with faith. There are times when you are in the middle of battle, of life doing everything right, but need something out of the ordinary. And that's where the prayer that moves the sky comes in. Ever thought about praying for an impossible customer through a professional door that seems locked up for years, or even for with someone that you can't even imagine finding anymore? Joshua shows us that faith in truth dares to ask for the impossible. Now important, Joshua only prayed because he was already fighting, i.e., he didn't wait for everything to fall from the sky. He was with focus on strength and faith, this balance between action and prayer. It is precious. There are people who pray but do not act, and there are those who act but incapable of praying. The secret is in uniting the two, and with that, God turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. But not everything in Joshua's doctrine was even victory. The next challenge was caused by a mistake within the people themselves. Everything seemed under control. After the fall of Jericho, Israel advanced with confidence. But when faced with the small town of Ai, were shamefully defeated. No one understood the problem was not in the strategy, but not a hidden sin. An Akan man had disobeyed God's command and kept to himself what was forbidden, and because of it the whole nation suffered. An individual error generated a collective consequence. This story shows how sin, same secret, can compromise the victory of many. The Z got beat down. Cried, asked, humiliated himself, and God replied the solution did not come with new tactics of war, but with correction. When sin has been exposed and treated, God's favor returned. The city of Ai was conquered. But only after the people learned their lesson could they not try to win on the outside if you are corrupted on the inside. This serves a company that does not value ethics for the family, that hides wounds for the ministry, who pretends where transparency God acts with freedom. Joshua understood that victory without sanctity is just courtesy, and look, this is worth too much these days sometimes. The answer we are looking for is in a simple self-analysis. What I'm hiding that might be getting in the way. My walk, it can be hurt, pride, lie, disobedience. God does not demand perfection, but he honors those who seek correction with sincerity. And that's how cleaning the camp. Joshua paved the way for a spiritual renewal that would follow soon after. After so many battles, Joshua took a break but didn't go to rest. Was to renew. He led the people to Mount Baal and erected an altar, offered sacrifices, and read aloud all the law of God. Imagine the scene: men, women, children, all gathered in, listening to the commandments that should guide your journey. This is more than a ritual. It's a powerful reminder that victory without exception turns into vanity. God, I didn't just want to conquer lands. He wanted hearts aligned in the day rush. The day is easy to forget the base. We gain territory, we fulfill dreams, we beat goals, but it is the essence. Joshua understood that he could not move forward militarily and retreat spiritually. So he insisted on renewing the vows of friendship with God. And this is a great practical example. When was the last time you did an audio review? Maybe it's time to fast again. Read the word more intentionally, or even ask for forgiveness. Where there was some break, to renew is to restart. This scene on Mount Ebal shows that faith is not just a cry of war, is also a reverent citizen. It is not enough to run after blessings. It is necessary to remember who grants each one of them and renew. Tolerance is not just a solemn act, it is strategic. It was after that moment that the people returned, even more focused with mission clarity and renewed courage. And little did they know that the greatest geographic achievements yet to come, Joshua wasn't just a warrior. He was a strategist guided by divine direction. And moved by faith, the conquests north and south of Canaan were simple victories. Military were the fulfillment of promises made generations ago. God didn't just give the order. He also entered the war in one of the battles. Stones fell from the sky on the enemies. Yes, paradise, when God fights together until heaven participates. What seemed impossible began to fall apart before an obedient people. Joshua faced mighty king's armies, well-armed fortified cities. But none of these threats managed to stop the advance of those who have a call, clear living faith and a heart guided by prayer. And look, this continues. Valid today. There are people beating giants with limited intelligence. Has entrepreneurs overcoming competition with wisdom that came from above. Has mothers raising children with a strength that can only come from heaven. The secret is not just the sword, is the presence of God. Joshua's every conquest expanded the territory and strengthened Israel's identity as a chosen people, but more than that, every victory reinforced the people's faith in one God that kept what it promises. When we look for this phase of the journey, it is clear that even with fights that stand firm, in the purpose you will see concrete results. And after so much conquered ground, the time has come to do something still most significant, to share the promises among those who walked together after battles. The time of sharing Joshua has come as a just and obedient leader. Began to distribute the promised land among the tribes of Israel. It was more than geography. It was the fulfillment of a promise made even in Abraham's day. And in this process, a character stands out, Caleb in his 80s. And 5 years full of vigor and faith, he asks for Hebron, the land of the giants. And the conquest, what a powerful lesson. He who walks with faith does not retire from purpose, just changes the mission phase. Another point that gets attention is what happened to the Levites. Unlike the other tribes, they didn't get a piece of land. His inheritance was Lord. They were scattered across several cities. Because your calling was to serve, not to possess, it shows that the reward of those who serve with curiosity is not always visible in the eyes of the world. And it's worth bringing this to today's reality. Not all recognition comes with applause or position. Sometimes the greatest privilege is to be closer to God than to the possessions. Joshua knew that dividing the earth well was so important. How much a mishandled promise can become a problem. How many families fall apart for not knowing how to deal with inheritances? How many projects fall apart because the victories were not well organized? Distributing the earth was an act of wisdom, faith, and correction. And even after all that, Joshua still had one last mission before he left Old. Joshua gathers the people and does what every wise leader does. Before leaving, delivers advice that is worth more than gold. He doesn't talk about war strategies, but unanimously exhorts the people to abandon the idols, not to mingle with the customs of neighboring nations. And remembering all that God had done was as if to say no. Forget who you are, nor where did they come from. In times of peace can memory fall asleep. And Joshua knew this. If you pay attention, we'll realize that this speech is almost a practical life class. Joshua doesn't use difficult words, but speaks in depth. He knew the problem wasn't with the enemy outside, but in the weakness that starts inside and looks. This remains true today. How many times we stop growing spiritually because we relax, because we stop praying, we stop watching. Joshua shows us that success with God needs constancy, not of impulse with firm voice and full heart. Joshua used a phrase that echoes to this day. Today, who will you serve? He knew that life with God requires daily decision. And this choice is not just made in the temple, it is made in the conversation of the day today. In financial choices and relationships, the people heard and responded, but the old leader knew that words are fragile if they are not supported by attitudes. And that's how it was with this speech. Remarkable that he said goodbye, leaving a legacy that would cross. Continues. Joshua departed at the age of 110, leaving behind no only conquered lands, but a story of curiosity, courage, and obedience, different from Moises. He saw with his own eyes the full fulfillment of God's promises. There was no statue erected, nor exaggerated glories, just the sincere recognition of a people who knew that man had done exactly what God sent, and that my friend is worth more than any trophy. What is impressive is that Joshua was not perfect. He missed, hesitated, was deceived, but it still remained at the center of God's will. Because at the end of the day, God doesn't look for perfect leaders. He looks for obedient hearts. Joshua was not lost in praise. He was not disappointed with power, nor deviated from the mission, and knows what is most beautiful. His legacy was not about him. It was about the God that he served, a legacy that inspired generations to stay focused. Strength, faith, and prayer. Even after his death, the people continued following the ways of the Lord, while the memory of Joshua was still alive among them. This shows that the impact of a well-lived life go through time. So think, well, what will be your legacy? What will they remember of you when the lights go out? Joshua's story does not end. In the grave, she continues in the example left. And now all this leads us to a reflection, deeper about strength, courage, and purpose. Now tell me, after all that, what part of Joshua's journey more confronted you? Which part inspired you? Because if you just watched this story, like someone who watches a movie and follows life the same way, something precious was lost on the way. Joshua's Bible is an invitation, an alert and a companion, an invitation to purposefully live, a warning against superficiality, and a glow that shows who we are becoming. You've been marching around your Jerichos. You've been praying boldly, even when it seems that the sky is silent. Or are you living a passive, warm faith, waiting for the walls to fall without taking a step? It's time to apply, time to choose. Who will you serve, to renew your covenant with God and to walk with courage, even when the ground looks unstable and you're wondering where to start? The answer: it's simple to start with a sincere prayer, then bear with faith whether this content touched you, so don't guard this just for you to subscribe to the active channel, the bell, and share with someone who needs to remember that there's still time to live a purposeful call here. We will go on together, studying, growing, and applying why the world needs more Joshua, courageous, faithful, and full of faith.